This is I Hear Things for April 30th, 2021, the Provenance of Podcasting. So this week I've got an early candidate for the Real Heroes of Podcasting Hero of the Year, or the RHOPHOTY, and also the most, I think, interesting and yet largely ignored by podcasters news story of the past couple of weeks. First, though, a little bit of a detour from the world of art, or as we say here in Boston, art. So my wife Tamsin and I have been watching This Is a Robbery, the world's biggest art heist on Netflix. The story of the theft of over $500 million worth of art from Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It's really an indelible part of the fabric of our little hub of the solar system here in Boston, and one of its greatest mysteries. Tamsin worked at the Gardner Museum for a few years back in the 90s, so she was a little bit more familiar with this story than I was. And by the way, to date, no connection between her employment and the art theft has ever been established. So when the heist happened, I had one foot out the door as an outgoing senior at Tufts, and I was getting ready to move to Penn State to take on a graduate assistantship. So I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention. But now that I know the full story of the Gardner heist, I continue to find it absolutely bonkers that two thieves dressed like cops could spend over 80 minutes in a famous museum like that and walk out with 13 works of art. At some point, you have to believe the world will again lay eyes on Rembrandt's Christ in the Storm on the Sea of Galilee. But we may never know where it's been for 31 years. How many stops has it made? In whose possession? Where and how was it kept? This information is all part of what art collectors call the provenance of a work of art, that detailed lineage that informs the buyer exactly where a piece of art has been, how it's changed hands over the years, and maybe even centuries of its existence. The provenance is integral to the intrinsic value of art. If one were to buy the Rembrandt, untouched from the museum, as if the heist had never occurred, it might be worth $100 million. And by the way, I think it's the second most valuable painting that was stolen. I think there's a Vermeer painting called The Concert that may be worth even more. But if you bought that Rembrandt painting slashed out of its frame with a box cutter like it was during the heist, it might be worth even less. But a detailed provenance of a painting like that, even cut from its original frame with box cutters, but one that included proof that it was, let's say, displayed above the fireplace of a murderous Boston crime lord, you'd probably pay more for that, not less. The painting itself has value, of course, a lot of value. But some of the value of art lies in where it came from and where it's been along the way. That journey is not unique, and it's not replicable. It's the value of provenance that's fueling the current activity in NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. Now, a few lines of code might give you a cat GIF or a Doge image, right? But anyone can copy those lines of code and own that digital file. It's just copy-paste. An NFT consists of those lines of Doge code, that image file, or whatever the digital form of art is, plus a string of data that is essentially a provenance. It's where it's been digitally. Practically speaking, that provenance takes the form of something called proof of work, which involves computational mining to arrive at the solutions to unique and incredibly difficult cryptographic problems. Unfortunately, solving those problems currently burns an enormous amount of energy, largely derived from fossil fuels, and there's been some great pieces in Wired and the New York Times on this. And by the way, all of that makes things like Elon Musk's simultaneous zeal for both energy-efficient electric vehicles and shoveling the tons of coal and oil into the cryptocurrency machine required to make Ethereum a bit confusing to me. So I'm not sure where I stand on the Doge father, Elon Musk, at the moment, but let's park that for now. I'm not an expert in any of this, and I'm not a crypto critic. I actually think that certainly Bitcoin and Ethereum and the like, they're real things, right? They're legit. I'm just curious. NFTs and the blockchain, they're going to sort out more energy-efficient procedures. Ethereum is already working to adopt an alternative to their proof of work process called proof of stake that'll be a lot more energy efficient. But those things aren't widely part of the process yet, so NFT-ifying the Doge memes that we pass around still uses enough energy to wash my clothes 5,000 times. And I don't think my current pandemic athleisure wear can take that. But creators like you're certainly correct to be interested in things like NFT and blockchain technology. Establishing the provenance of a purely digital creation, like, say, a podcast, is potentially important to establish ownership, uniqueness, and value. If Nyan Cat is worth over $800,000, and that's the cat with the Pop-Tart body that poops rainbows, then I think your podcast creations deserve their moment in the sun. You may not have minted an actual NFT for your podcast, and I don't know, maybe that'll never happen. But for most of us, we already have the next best thing, an RSS feed. Now, credit to my super sharp wife, she who was not connected with the Gardner heist, Tamsin. She's the one to help me make that linkage, really. And maybe you should pre-order her book at tamsinwebster.com/book. Just saying, she's pretty smart. But no matter what happens to the various platforms and services that distribute your content, right? Wherever you're hosting, wherever you're distributing your content, wherever your podcasts are being shown, having control of where your files are hosted and owning your RSS feed are the keys to recreating it exactly as it should be, as if you'd always been there, anywhere you go, at any time. That single URL and the lines of XML that it links to put the podcast version of this newsletter up on 20 different platforms last week. Now, some of those platforms pulled the show from the Apple listing, but Apple itself ingests that single URL, that RSS feed, and boom, I've got a show everywhere. Now, an RSS feed is not exactly as non-fungible as a non-fungible token. I'm pretty sure you can funge with it a little bit. But owning and maintaining the health of your RSS feed is your legacy. It's your provenance. It lets people who subscribed to your show 10 years ago on iTunes instantly be able to get to your show on Pocket Casts or Overcast. It lets you set up shop on Spotify with just a click. And it gives you a way to carry subscribers with you into the future. And I mean the old style, classic sense of subscriber, what we might call followers now on Apple and Spotify. Let you carry them with you no matter what storefronts you may busk your wares in the future. Here's an example. Back in 2012, I started putting up a very sporadic podcast called Tom Reads His Spam, and I think you could probably guess what that's about. Some years I posted maybe 10, 15 episodes. Some years I didn't post any. The last time I posted an episode was in June of 2019 until yesterday. Yesterday I posted one, and boom, there it was, right in my feed with all of the prior content delivered to everybody who subscribed to it, just like normal. Now, there are plenty of people who would label Tom Reads His Spam as a pod fade, since it's been a couple of years, and they probably think it should be deleted from the universe. Well, guess what? As long as I have my files hosted somewhere, and I maintain the health of that RSS feed, that remains my choice, not somebody else's. People who subscribed to Tom Reads His Spam years ago just got, I don't know if treated is the right word, but just got treated to a new episode. Controlling that feed gives me 9 years of provenance. The provenance and power of owning your RSS feed is also something to think about when you consider the importance of both Apple and Spotify introducing a subscription layer to their platforms. You have a single RSS feed now, and that powers almost every vending machine in existence to carry your brand of podcast soda. Imagine starting your podcast back in 2004, like Leo Laporte, and having a single RSS feed that stretches back nearly 1,800 episodes and 17 years and Zeus knows how many subscribers. Now imagine putting that show behind a subscription wall at Apple or Spotify. You're literally starting from zero. No shows, no subscribers. You don't host the media. If you leave Apple or Spotify, or if they leave you for whatever reason, the provenance of that content, that subscription content, is not yours. You don't take your Spotify followers with you. You don't take your Apple subscribers with you. You don't even use RSS to populate your Apple subscription content. It's done with their proprietary tool, Apple Podcast Connect. You upload through that. There will be multiple versions of your content and multiple chains of custody across platforms, multiple provenances. And who knows what else is going to emerge over the next several years. I mean, you have to assume there will be a Google answer to all of this for Android devices, right? Now, I am not one of those you can pry RSS from my cold dead hands people. I'm just not. Formats change. RSS is going to change. And maybe what we think of as RSS becomes something else. But owning that single provenance chain has enormous value. And I'm just suggesting that when or if you make decisions about making the leap, not just into subscription content, but into the multiple balkanized walled gardens that seem to be the next coming wave of podcasting, don't undervalue what you're giving up in losing that humble chunk of XML, that not so easily fungible token, the RSS feed. Now, all of this brings me to an early candidate for the 2021 Real Heroes of Podcasting Hero of the Year, Dan Le Batard. I've been a loyal listener of the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugatz for years. And I've continued to listen now that he's left ESPN, where he used to be at the beginning of the year. And for the past couple of weeks, even though Apple and Spotify have dominated the podcast trades and the news cycle, there's some news from Dan that I don't think got quite enough play, quite enough credit. So as I slide the envelope containing his name into the sealed nominations box here at RHOPHOTY headquarters, yes, Real Heroes of Podcasting Hero of the Year, allow me to present 3 reasons why Dan and his team are in fact the heroes we deserve. Number 1, Dan and his team, including John Stugatz-Weiner and Mike Ryan Ruiz, put out 5 podcasts every weekday. 5 good podcasts every weekday, plus 5 or so additional weekly shows. Try doing 1 single hour on Clubhouse and tell me how you think that went. The amount of respect I have for an audio team that can pull off hours of great live radio and now podcasts every single day is immeasurable. Doing what they do is incredibly difficult, even once a week, and they maintain that level of quality daily. If you want to get better at guests, production, handling callers, and maintaining the flow of a consistently entertaining show, you can't do much worse than starting with the Le Batard Show. Number 2, and here's the news that I think did not get enough play amongst podcasters. They just licensed their podcasts to DraftKings for $50 million and 3 years, like a boss. Have there been bigger deals? Sure. But those have involved media properties changing hands to other media properties, and they've been sales. This isn't Wondery selling to Amazon or even 99% Invisible selling to SiriusXM. This is a podcast licensing, not selling, to a brand. I had a reporter ask me a few weeks ago if we had reached the end of the quote-unquote big deals in podcasting. Are you kidding me? There's a podcast for every brand and a brand for every podcast. This could just be the beginning for licensing deals like this. Yes, there have been successful branded podcasts, but this is a lot more than that. We may look back on this deal as a watershed moment maybe for podcasting. Brands can think a whole lot bigger than just making a branded show about technology or work. Why couldn't the armchair in Armchair Expert be a Herman Miller? Also, signing a licensing deal with a compatible brand and not a specific platform, it changes the calculus from exclusively available content to get that content everywhere you can. In other words, when you hitch your wagon to a particular platform, your goals are adjacent to that platform's goals, but they're not exactly the same. You want to grow your audience, but the platform wants to grow your audience on their platform. But a branded deal, like the DraftKings licensing for Dan Le Batard, that represents a perfect alignment of goals. You both want the biggest, best audience you can get wherever they are. That's good for the brand, and it's good for you ultimately, because if you've kept control of your RSS feed, you can take your audience with you for leverage in the next deal. Which brings me to my third and final point. When Dan negotiated his departure from ESPN, he walked away with full control of his RSS feed. I have no doubt that this was fully negotiated with ESPN and valued accordingly in the deal. I don't think it was given away. But getting control of his RSS feed meant that the provenance of the show remains intact. Dan's listeners come with him for the next chapter. No one gets left behind. When Dan starts the show's new relationship with DraftKings, he won't be starting from scratch. he'll be starting with everything. And whether he renews with DraftKings in 3 years or pursues a different deal, that RSS feed remains the one asset of his show that doesn't go home at 5 p.m. No, actually, we're all home. Never mind. Subscription content and direct support of creators is a crucial part of the robust scaffolding for podcasting and the monetization of what we all love. If it's right for you, go for it. The medium needs great subscription content, don't get me wrong, but value the bifurcation, deprecation, and diminishment of your RSS feed accordingly. Make that part of the calculus. The RSS feed has been the little engine that could throughout the history of podcasting, and we should never forget its power. A quick plug. Today, Friday, April 30th, Edison Research, my company, will deliver the latest quarterly report of the podcast consumer tracker to our subscription clients. And there'll be an updated comprehensive industry ranker of all of the leading producers, and also the latest shifts in behavior in platform and service usage, and they're happening. New this quarter is a brand tracker. And we have a brand tracker ranking that lists the top recalled brands in podcast advertising, both unaided and aided. So if you represent a content network or an agency and you'd like a demo of the platform, you find me. You can find pricing and other information about the podcast consumer tracker at edisonresearch.com. Well, if you've enjoyed this foray into the world of NFTs, RSS, and AT, I hope you'll share and subscribe if you haven't already, and follow the podcast. Hosting, bandwidth, a new microphone, thank you, and coffee are all powered by buymeacoffee.com/Tom Webster. If you'd like to support this free newsletter and the free podcast, buymeacoffee.com/Tom Webster. And I'll be back next week with more from I Hear Things. Thanks for listening.